Okay, so I have just started the recording. So welcome everyone. So today with me, I have a very special guest, and the guest name is Steve Porter. So let me give you an introduction of Steve. Steve is my mentor. So that is the introduction which I would like to give before anything else. So Steve is my mentor. He inspired me to become PST. He is the one who inspired me to wear this jersey. Steve calls himself as a member of Scrum.org. Steve is also co-creator of the Nexus framework along with Ken Schwaber. And apart from that, Steve has been looking forward with respect to the helping PSTs in terms of onboarding them. There are so many things which Steve has done for Scrum.org, and I would let Steve to give a little introduction of himself in his own way. But for me, he is my mentor. He is my coach. He is my guide. Thank you so much, Steve, that you took time to share some of your insights with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nagesh. Yeah, it's always interesting when people try to describe what I do at scrum.org, including my wife. They're very difficult because I do have my hands in many different things. I guess at the end of the day, I'm just trying to help people out. And I think that's one of the things that I've always loved about the job that I have in working at scrum.org, and even helping people with Scrum is this idea of people working together, helping each other out, trying to achieve goals, trying to achieve whether it be a personal goal or a business goal. So it was pretty natural for me to work with Nagesh to help him achieve his personal goals. And it's been really gratifying for me to see him pay that forward, to then go and become a trainer and then hold events like this, where he works with people like you to help you learn more, get better at what you're doing, achieve your goals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's nice to see that my investment has been well placed. I have, just to give you a little bit more of my background, I am probably at the root, I'm a developer. Anybody here have a development background? Cut code, have sworn at a compiler when it didn't do what you thought it wanted to do. That's kind of my background. So that's how I was introduced to Scrum, was being a member of a Scrum team as a developer, and work started there and then slowly transitioned into more, and I'm going to use air quotes here, leadership roles, not kind of traditional leadership roles. Like I'm not running a company, I'm not a CEO, but I was a team lead. And then I would lead projects. And now I lead, and I'm going to use again that air quotes, I help lead the PST community, not by telling them what to do. It's the professional Scrum trainer community isn't the sort of community that you can just tell what to do. That they're not those type of people, but just lead by example, give them suggestions and help. And hopefully you're here because you also inspire to be leaders and to work with people and to help them. So I'm always happy to chat and answer questions. As Nagesh said, we really don't have a detailed plan for this. We have a goal, talk a little bit about resilience and dealing with the challenges that we have, but we will adapt our style based on the questions that come from you and what provides value to you over the next 30 so minutes.
Thank you so much, Steve. So Steve, this is the definition from the website, from the web. So resilience is defined as the power or ability to return to the original form, position, etc. after being bent, compressed, or stressed elasticity. How do you define resilience, and especially in the context of teams, now that we are in a pandemic situation, COVID situation, where we are hyper distributed? So how do you see resilience?
For me, a lot of it is around that ability to adapt, especially to stress. I'll give you an example here. We recently had an ice storm come through my part of Canada, and trees that did the best were the ones that were able to bend. So it's that ability that when you're put under stress, to be able to absorb that stress, to be able to adapt to that stress. And then when the stress is relieved, you can go back to your original state. One of the interesting things about designing for resilience or resilient systems is often when they return to their normal state, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, when they return to their normal state, because they've been put under stress, they actually return stronger. The trees that survived the ice storm, we've had that was in the fall last year, we've had a marvelous spring and summer system here because the trees are far more green, the forests are more green because they were put under stress, they absorbed the stress, and then they came back stronger. And what I'm really enjoying, enjoy maybe isn't the right word, but what I'm observing during this period where the entire world has been put under stress is to see the companies that are resilient and the people that are resilient absorb the stress, bend with the stress, adapt to the stress. And then the hope is they'll come out stronger at the other end.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Steve. And we say that transparency, inspection, adaptation, these are the key pillars of Scrum. So, and do you see an impact on these because of this hyper distributed remote teams? So how do they help in being resilient, being adaptive? What's your take on that?
Well, when I do think about the teams that are having to adapt to this new world and the ones that are dealing the best with the stress, their ability to continue to live these live these pillars is where the challenge is. How do you continue to be transparent when you're unable to connect with people in the fashion that you used to be in? How are and if that transparency is impacted, how does that change your ability to adapt? How does that change your ability to inspect? So I wouldn't say that these pillars would help you be more resilient. What I would say is your level of resiliency impact how your ability to be transparent, your ability to inspect, your ability to adapt, how well you change based on this new situation. One of the things that I've really appreciated over the last several months, I read a really great quote. It was from a senior leader at Tata, which is an Indian-based consulting company. One of their senior leaders talked about the advantage they had when the pandemic hit, because they had been going through an agile transformation over the last 5 to 10 years. They've been going through this period. So they already had a lot of experience with inspecting and adapting and going through changes. So when the pandemic hit, they already had some of the skills they needed to transition to this new period. I guess you could say they were already under a fair amount of stress going through these agile transformations. And if I assume people on this call are working with companies going through that, you know the stress that can put under people, but it also builds that resilience so that when the pandemic hit, in a lot of cases, a country such as India, who'd already been dealing with a lot of changes, were in a good spot to say, oh, well, this is just another change. We've been dealing with change for the last several years. This is just another change. Let's just go and adapt to it, which makes me feel very optimistic for your country's ability to come out the other end of this strengthened.
Thank you so much. And the next piece which I want to really talk about is sprint goal. Already there is a lot of confusion within the agile community with respect to sprint goal and sprint scope. And most often the teams which I work with, they struggle understanding the difference. But this is my belief that having solid sprint goals, especially in this case of pandemic situation where you have teams which are hyper distributed, can really create this more safe space for the people, because it can provide that flexibility, negotiability for the teams. What's your take on that? How do you see the impact of resilience on sprint goals?
Let me think about that for a second. Resilience on sprint goals. When you were, the preamble to talk about that, when you talked about the value of sprint goals in this new environment, if you had previously been working in an environment where you were in closer communication with people, like you weren't, everyone wasn't working from their home with their children behind them in an environment where, so you were more used to having that close communication with people. Having the ability to talk to people and to come up with a plan every day was just easier to do. If I needed to have a question answered, I can go walk across the room, walk across the office and talk to someone. When we all moved to a distributed environment, the turnaround time on your questions expanded. So instead of me immediately walking over to someone's desk and say, hey, I've got a question, it might have been, you have to ping them on Slack or Microsoft Teams, or you had to send them an email. And that delay in getting feedback can really have a negative impact on your ability to deliver. The reason I'm talking about that negative impact is if you have a very strong goal, right, which is loosely defined, but still provides you enough guidance to know whether you're going in the right direction or not. If you do have that well-defined goal, then that you have less chance or less risk that delay is going to derail you, because at least while you're waiting for an answer, you're hopefully still heading in the same direction.
Yeah.
And that ability to have everyone closely aligned around something can act as a bit of a safeguard where you don't have that immediate conversation with someone. So yes, I don't get an immediate answer from my customer. I don't get an immediate answer from my product owner. I don't get an immediate answer from my coworker. But if we're all kind of generally heading in the same direction, while I'm waiting for that answer, while I'm working in a world of imperfect information because I haven't been able to contact someone on my team, we're all hopefully still heading in the same direction. I'm not going to veer off too far. One of the challenges with creating a very detailed plan and then trying to follow that plan is if things change, and they do, you run the risk of going off the rails as things are changing and you're not hearing about them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very well said, Steve, and it goes with my values also. I'm going to jump a little bit directly to the Scrum values, which is one of my favorites. So how do you see the relationship between being resilient and being able to live these 5 values on a daily basis? Do you see these values have any relationship, or what's your take on that?
Generally, having strong values are an important piece of being resilient. When you are put under stress, if you don't have something that you can, something deep, something meaningful to fall back on, it's much easier to break. There's an interesting quote, and I wish I could remember who came up with it. Maybe someone can look it up for me. Is if you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything. So having a strong belief system can definitely help with resilience, and Scrum with these values gives you a little bit of a belief system to act as that buffer, to act as that additional thing to fall back on when you're put under stress.
That's well said, Steve. So so enough of me asking questions to you. I want to really open the floor for people who would like to ask questions. So we can actually see how do anybody has a question, you can just raise your hand and you can just ask the question. And this is a great opportunity, guys. So let us see if you have any in your mind.
Hey, Nagesh and Steve, Sandeep here. I have one. And this is something which I always keep on facing, project versus product, convincing people, convincing organizations who have so much heavily relied on a project-based way of working to change the mindset for a product-based thinking or a product development thinking. So it would be really interesting to hear from Steve what his take, especially an organization wherein it's not really formally transforming from a traditional to a uh, to a agile organization. But what would you suggest? What would be the best ways to approach?
Before I answer that, I am curious, and I'll ask you. I like other people to think about this as well. What's the one thing that when you're trying to convince a customer to move from one to the other, what's the one thing that you say to help them understand that projects are not the way to go? I'm going to let that sit with you for a second. I'm just curious because you want to move people in this direction. So what do you tell them about projects that make them a bad way of doing things? That it's much better to have a product mindset.
Yeah, I mean, in this specific case, when you are only focused on project, you're not really thinking much about the end delivery to or how much satisfied the end user is. You're just focused on fulfilling the you're focused on fulfilling the things which are specified in the project charter and the goals of the project. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, because when I think about trying to get them to think less about project and more about product, it is to think less about predefined scope up front, where you've somehow magically decided ahead of time that this work is going to provide value before the work's actually done, and get people to think more about what value is the product going to deliver, what value is this work going to deliver once it's done. And hopefully businesses, I do try to talk a lot about value when I'm talking to companies, and you'll have to find the right wording for them, but most companies at the end of the day they want to generate revenue. They want happy customers, they want more productivity. They have a lot of things that they see as value. So find out what they value and then get them to think around, okay, great, we want to deliver value. You've got a whole bunch of assumptions here around what's going to provide value. Instead of bucketing all of these assumptions up in something fairly big and heavy, let's think about what's the smallest, most important thing we can do. Let's focus on that and get it done. Let's realize some return on our investment for that value, and then do the next thing, and then do the next thing. Getting people out of this mindset that they want to batch a whole bunch of things together, including a whole bunch of assumptions and a whole bunch of risk, batch them all together and then deliver them all in a batch, usually over a relatively long period of time. And instead get them to think about what small thing of value can we deliver today so that we can get a good return on our investment, that we can learn something, and then we can build on that. And while you're doing that, not only are you incrementally delivering value, which again, most companies should be really happy about doing, right? Most business people know that a dollar made today is much more important than a dollar I'm going to make in a week or a dollar I'm going to make tomorrow. So not only are they generating revenue sooner, which is good, but they're also minimizing risk because they're working on the high important things and getting them delivered. So as you're trying to transition people from the project mindset to the product mindset, getting to think about value, getting to think about how you can get feedback from the customers, how you can disconnect the risk, you can minimize the risk, all hopefully help them see the value in moving away from that mindset.
I think that's,
Do you have any follow-up
Thank you.
questions?
that's very insightful, Steve. Do we have anybody else who has a question?
Natish?
Yeah, Steve. So my question is, at this point of time, when we are in this journey of transformation, there will be a question for should we be measuring agility or should we be measuring resilience? So any thoughts on that? Because now people and companies have started how agile we are, and should they be measuring resilience for it, or should we, like, any thoughts on that? Yeah.
The good news, I think, to that question is, I think the measures that you would see, that you would look to get a sense for how agile you are, would also lead themselves well to measuring how resilient you are. I think there's a lot of overlap there. Can I ask, Natish, when you think about measuring for agility, what measures have you seen people use?
I have been using just what I can see as people using matrices, which they can't make any sense. Which they can't tell that how back they're getting sooner or how quickly they're able to adopt. That's
Right.
what they're lacking. That's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
And I'm curious, we've got a whole bunch of people on the call here. If I could ask you to take 20 seconds, think about the measures that you've been working with on your company to measure how agile they are. What measures have you been using? And can I get you to dump them in the chat window? And you don't have to wait. You can just do it as you go along. There's no one doing it at once. Because I'm curious to see if the measures that you're doing, how they can also apply to resilience. Self-organization, team happiness and morale, cycle time, lead time. Some very common ones here. Thank you for sharing that. A couple of the ones that jumped out here for me, there are some here that personally, when I think of them, they're good things to measure. Team happiness, customer satisfaction. When I think of how agile a company is, my first thought is that might not be a good measure of how agile a company is. I think that's probably a good measure for how able they are to deliver value, how able they are to be agile. So if you've got unhappy employees, your ability to change is going to be relatively low. If you've got unhappy employees, you're going to have unhappy customers. It was a great line. Your customers can't be any happier than your employees are, which is an interesting view on things. So those are good leading indicators for how agile a company could be. When I think about measuring the agility of a company, one of the things that I always look for are things like cycle time. How quickly can I adapt to change? And cycle time measures, if I start something, how quickly do I get it done? Longer the cycle time, the less agile you are. Now, when I think about resilience, that ability to change, there is definitely some tie-in there. If you're in an environment that's put under stress and you need to resist that, if you need to bend to that, how quickly you can change is a direct connection for how resilient you're going to be. So the good news is that if companies are already measuring things like how quickly do we get feedback? How quickly do we learn? How quickly do we take what we've learned and then apply what we've learned? And for me, that's really at the heart of agility. And hopefully to do that, you're going to have happy customers. You're going to have to deliver value. You're going to have to do some of those things you talked about. If you're already measuring those things, it is also a view of how resilient you're going to be. Nitish, does that help? Do you have a follow-up question?
That really helps. That gives so much of insightfulness to me. Too much to thank.
Thank you for that question. And thanks everybody for providing the ideas on metrics. By the way, there are some metrics in there that I know that people use to measure their agility, but they're ones that really are just looking at, you know, what level of output am I doing, which is still an interesting metric, but you sometimes need to take a step back, take a larger view of things to see really how adaptive to change the organization is that you're working with. That was a great question. Thank you. I'd love another one.
We can have one more question. Yeah.
I would like to ask a question. Since we're talking about the team happiness and things like that, how can you build, we are building Scrum team, making autonomous, etc. But at the same time, how can we bring a resilient team? What should we be focusing on?
That is a good question. And we're talking at the team level, correct?
Yes, that's right.
All right. Let me try. I'm thinking as I go along here. If I'm looking to build resilience at the team level, one of the things I will focus on is, again, getting tight feedback loops, right? So making sure that as you're learning new things, you're adapting to those new things as quickly as possible. And you can certainly do that at the team level. I think the other thing that's important to encourage at the team level is, and we talk a lot about this, self-organization, self-management. At the team level, your individual team members are going to be under stress with the change that they have. And if you don't encourage the people who are experiencing that stress to be able to discuss ways of alleviating that stress, to adapt to the changes, if you're not encouraging individuals to talk about the challenges they're having and sharing those with others and then working as a group to fix that, if you're not promoting that, then your ability to change to what's actually happening is diminished. So that's one thing you can think about doing at the team level, is really encouraging people to acknowledge that they're under stress, acknowledge things are changing, and then to work with the people they are working with on a daily basis to come up with some solutions. So that's one piece that I would encourage. I think the other piece that I would encourage, and this is something I personally do struggle with, is to encourage empathy amongst your teams. I work with a team where we're a little distributed at scrum.org. We have a cohort in Boston, which is probably the largest group, but then we have people kind of spread out across North America, mostly, entirely. And I'm fortunate. I've always been a remote member of our team. I'm based out of a city in Canada called Winnipeg. So I've always worked remotely. I don't have any children at home. I've got a nice home office, good solid internet connection, lots of high-tech gear to help me be a very productive member of a remote team. My team members in Boston, who used to go into the office every day, when COVID happened, all of their children suddenly were home with them and they all had to shift to working from home. And some of my team members didn't have a home office, didn't have a good solid internet connection. They were working off their kitchen table. And I would be on meetings with them while I watched their children run around behind them and hear them yelling about how happy they are about their brand new the high score they just got on Fortnite, which I didn't have to deal with. Right? And initially, my team members weren't as productive as they were. And I was annoyed because I lacked empathy. It's like, what do you mean you can't manage this? How hard can it be working from home? I've been doing this for the last 5 years. How hard can it be? And it wasn't until I realized how much stress they're under, because not only are they having to do a full-time job, but they're having to homeschool their kids. Some of my coworkers, their spouses lost their jobs because they worked in an industry that suddenly was shut down. And my lack of empathy, or I had some empathy, but not as much as I could, didn't allow our team to get better because I would dismiss any concerns they had. And if you dismiss the concerns of your team members, as a team, you're not getting better. So that's something I would encourage you to look at, is as we're all dealing with a whole bunch of stress, to have empathy towards the people that will help you listen, be a better listener, and hopefully help you understand their needs more, which will help you learn faster, which will then feed into that cycle of adapting quicker.
That was amazing. That was amazing, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah, we're everyone's struggling right now. The thing that I really like is, even though we're struggling, we are still surviving and thriving. That's that resilience piece. But it's a good thing to acknowledge that these are difficult times for everyone, but we're getting through them, and we'll continue to get through them. And I'm an optimist. I've always, and Nagesh has probably heard me say this, Scrum is built for optimists. I always align the next sprint, no matter how bad this sprint was, the next sprint can always be better. And
every sprint is a hope.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. That's great.
So hopefully you're able to carry that optimism back to your work, with your coworkers, with your family, as we deal with a lot of change at the moment. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I mean, my 2 cents of this is like being more empathetic towards the team members. And thank you so much for showing your vulnerability and your radical candor, Steve. So I appreciate a lot. So that kind of brings us towards the end of this particular session. So what are the ways in which some of the people, or most of the people, would like to reach out to you? So what is the easiest way to reach you?
So the 2 easiest ways to reach out to me are LinkedIn and Twitter. I don't tweet or put posts up a lot. I'm more of a listen to other people and answer questions type of person. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, or you've seen something that's really interesting and would like me to see it, then include me in a reply, or comment on something that you've seen and tag me on it, and I'm more than happy to engage with you that way.
Thank you so much. And one last thing which you would like to recommend people to develop that empathy, which you said, that was like a mic drop for me. So what would be that one piece of advice?
Just find an opportunity to ask people, hey, how you doing? In a way that is meaningful, and offering up help, anything I can do to help. It can be a great way of showing someone that the challenges that they're going through is something that you care about.
So fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for very impromptu answers, because I did not have any questions in my mind. It was not prepared at all. And it is also a true demonstration of resilience, by the way. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to stop this recording. Thank you.